Mom said. "You'll never be anything, stop dreaming," and slammed my bedroom door. I packed my bags without a word. 2 years later, she begged me to come back when I. The sound of that slam echoed louder than anything she had ever said to me. I stood there, still holding the sketchpad I hadn't dared show her. It was filled with car designs, sleek curves, hybrid tech integration, bold lines, things I'd spent weeks perfecting. But to her it was nonsense, delusion, and a waste of time. "You think you're gonna be someone?" she hissed, just before walking out. "You're nothing. Always were. Always will be. Stop dreaming, Matthew." That was the night I stopped talking. Not just to her, but to anyone who had ever made me feel small for wanting something more. I zipped my duffel bag slowly, like I was folding up the last chapter of my life. No anger. No yelling. Just a cold, strange quiet in my chest. I didn't have a plan. Just a destination, anywhere but here. The final thing I did before leaving was place that sketchpad on my pillow. Not for her. For me. A silent promise. I'd be back someday, but not as the boy she broke. I'd return as the man I built. The front door creaked as I stepped out, barely audible over the sound of rain beginning to fall. It was poetic, really. The kind of night you'd see in a movie when the underdog walks away from everything he's ever known. Except this wasn't a movie. It was real. And it was only just beginning. Freedom felt nothing like I imagined. It wasn't exhilarating. It wasn't romantic. It was cold. Wet socks. Hunger pangs. Quiet tears in a dark bus station bathroom while trying to figure out which direction hurt less. I spent the first week sleeping in the back of my busted Toyota Corolla, parked behind a 24-hour gym where I used to sneak in for showers. That car, dented and loud, was the last gift my grandfather gave me before he passed. "Chase what matters, not what's easy," he'd said. I remembered that every time I gripped the steering wheel so tight it left marks on my palms. I found work wherever I could, mostly under-the-table gigs. I'd bus tables in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and resignation. I hauled boxes in the back of a dusty hardware store where the manager called everyone "kid" and paid in cash from a cigar box. At night I sketched. On napkins, receipt paper, cardboard. I kept the lines flowing even when my hands shook from exhaustion. Nobody knew I was homeless. I kept clean, smiled when I had to, nodded at small talk. I lied when people asked where I lived. "Just moved to town," I'd say. Still settling in. There was a night, around month 4, when I thought about going back. I'd just been kicked out of a cheap motel for being $20 short. I was sick. Real sick. Flu, I think. And I was sitting outside on the curb, shivering in a thin hoodie, watching people go in and out like I didn't exist. I called my mother. I didn't mean to, my fingers just did it. Reflex, maybe? She didn't pick up. Not even a voicemail. I remember laughing. The sound was ugly and hollow. But I didn't go back. Instead, I picked myself up, found a shelter that would take me in for the night, and the next morning, I dragged myself to an old auto garage with a "help wanted" sign that had been taped to the door for weeks. I begged for the job. The owner, gruff guy named Hank, let me work unpaid for 2 days just to prove myself. On the 3rd day, he paid me. On the 10th, he handed me a toolbox. A month later, he let me crash on the cot in the storage room. And that tiny, well-slicked garage? That became my second shot at life. But it wasn't enough just to survive. I wanted to build. So I saved. Every single cent. And at night, when the engine stopped roaring and the tools were locked away, I worked on my dream. My sketches turned into digital mock-ups. I'd borrowed an old laptop from Hank's nephew and taught myself design software. I'd work until the screen blurred and my fingers cramped. I entered every online competition I could find, uploaded my designs to forums, shared mock-ups on obscure automotive Reddit threads, hoping, praying someone would notice. And someone did. It was a Tuesday morning, 5 minutes before I had to start sanding down a rusted hood from a '97 Civic, when the email came in. Subject line: "Your concept just broke the internet." I thought it was spam. One of those "Congratulations! You've won!" type of scams that prey on desperate people. But then I saw the sender, Julian Hart, founder of Driveline, an automotive innovation platform I had religiously followed for over a year. He'd seen one of my designs. The Orion e-Roadster, a sleek electric prototype I built entirely from scratch using only free CAD software, scrap concepts, and 2 years' worth of coffee-stained sketches. It had been shared on Reddit by a stranger, someone I'd sent it to for feedback weeks earlier. That stranger turned out to be a design intern at Driveline. I never even knew their name. Julian's email was short, but I read it 100 times. "This is one of the most compelling indie design proposals we've ever seen. Your vision is disruptive. Reach out. Let's talk." I didn't send that civic. Instead, I ran to the diner down the street, bought a coffee I couldn't afford, and opened my laptop at the corner table near the window, the one with the crooked leg. I wrote back a message so careful it took me an hour to send. I kept thinking, don't sound desperate. Don't sound like you just spent the night sleeping behind a wall of tires. Julian responded within minutes. 2 days later, I was on a video call with him and his business partner, Layla. They were sitting in a glass office in L.A., surrounded by whiteboards and product mock-ups. I was in Hank's garage, pretending the cluttered shelves behind me were part of some gritty, minimalist aesthetic. They didn't care. They asked about my process, my inspirations, what I wanted to do next. I told them everything. Every hour I spent learning design. Every mistake. Every sketch that turned into something better. I told them about wanting to build cars that weren't just efficient, but beautiful. Machines that didn't just get people from A to B, but made them feel alive. By the end of the call, Julian leaned forward and said, "We want to fund your prototype. Full build. You'll have full creative control." I thought I misheard him. "You're serious?" I said, blinking. Layla smiled. "We've backed worse ideas for more money," Julian added. "And none of those ideas had 3 million views in 48 hours. I sat there stunned. My sketch, had gone viral. Apparently, someone had reposted it to TikTok with a dramatic voiceover and moody synth music. From there, it exploded. Car channels. Design blogs. Even a segment on morning cable news. "Young designer's dream may change the future of EVs." Hank was the first person I told. He didn't say much, just nodded once, then grunted. "Guess I'll need to hire a new grunt." I laughed. He didn't. I think he was a little sad to see me go. They flew me out a week later. I wore my only decent shirt. Layla met me at the terminal in a black Porsche Taycan. "You'll be driving one of these soon," she said casually, tossing me a welcome packet. That night, in a hotel bed I didn't have to pay for, under sheets that felt like clouds, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "You were wrong, Mom." And tomorrow, I'd start proving it, on a scale she could never have imagined. By the end of the year, everything changed. The Orion e-Roadster prototype made its public debut at an auto show in Austin. I stood there in a tailored navy suit, one that actually fit me, watching people from tech blogs and luxury magazines swarm around the car I had imagined on a greasy napkin just 18 months earlier. Reporters shook my hand. Investors asked for meetings. I got invited to podcasts, tagged in design roundups, even featured in a documentary series about the new wave of innovators. They called me a visionary, an outsider prodigy, a disruptor. Funny how those titles always come after the success. I moved into a high-rise downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows, smart lighting, silent floors. I kept a couch no one sat on and a desk I rarely used. My days were spent in studios, design labs, strategy meetings. My name was starting to mean something. And then, the phone rang. I had just wrapped up a dinner with Julian and a few execs, some handshake deal that would put the Orion into limited production, when I saw the call. A number I hadn't saved, but one I knew by heart. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Hello?" At first, nothing. Then a breath. "Shaky." "Matthew," she said, her voice hesitant, thinner than I remembered. It was her. My mother. I saw you. On the news. Your car. They said you made it. I didn't say anything. I watched my reflection in the car window across the valet lane, slick suit, clean cut, watch that cost more than my old Corolla. I barely recognized the man staring back. I've been trying to reach you, she continued. I didn't know how. I didn't know if you'd even answer. I waited. It's been hard, she said softly. The house is gone. After your father died, I made mistakes. We lost a lot. And I'm not well. I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't do this alone. There it was. Need. Not regret. Not remorse. Just need. I wanted to feel something. Pity. Anger. Anything. But all I felt was distance. I asked, what exactly are you calling for? Silence. Then, in the faintest, most pathetic whisper, she said, I want to come live with you. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, text me your address. What? Why? I'll be there in 2 days. Then I hung up. And I knew what I was going to do. 2 days later, I pulled up to the crumbling house I used to call home. I was behind the wheel of a graphite black Aston Martin DB11, sleek, silent, and wildly out of place in that neighborhood. The same cracked sidewalks. Same sagging rooflines. But the moment I stepped out, time felt warped. Like I was walking through a memory, but from someone else's life. The house looked smaller now. Dingier. The paint was peeling around the doorframe. The porch light was hanging by a wire. For a moment I just stood there, remembering the last time I walked out that door. 2 duffel bags, a heart full of anger, and a whisper of hope I barely believed in. I knocked once. It creaked open, and there she was. My mother. Thinner. Older. Her hair pulled back in a tired bun. She wore a faded sweater and a look that tried to be warm but didn't quite know how anymore. She blinked at me. Matthew? She asked, like she wasn't sure if it was me or a dream her loneliness had conjured. I smiled politely. You said you wanted to talk? She motioned me inside, suddenly flustered. Yes, come in, come in. This place is a mess. I wasn't expecting. Her voice trailed off as her eyes scanned my suit, my watch, the calm expression on my face. I could see it, the dawning realization that I was no longer the boy she'd crushed with her words. I sat on the couch, the same one I used to curl into when her storms got too loud. The cushions sagged now. Everything felt coated in a thin film of dust and regret. She brought tea in mismatched mugs, hands shaking. I've been thinking about you, she said. You were always special, you know. I tilted my head. No. I don't know. She looked down. I was harsh. Too harsh. But I thought I was protecting you. The world's cruel, Matthew. I didn't want you to dream too big and end up hurt. I let her talk. About how lonely it had been. How no one visited. How the bills kept stacking up. How everything felt like it was falling apart. And when I saw you on TV, her eyes welled up. I realized how wrong I was. You became something. Without me. I leaned back, slow and quiet. You were right, you know, I said, voice steady. I was nothing. Her face dropped. But I became something. I continued, the moment I left. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. You crushed every hope I had. Mocked every ambition. Told me I was worthless. You don't get to rewrite that now just because I made it. Tears started to slip down her cheeks. I didn't know how to love you, she whispered. No, I said. You just chose not to. She stared at me, fragile and unsure, waiting for the redemption she thought this moment would give her. I stood up. You don't get to come with me, I said. And I walked to the door. My hand paused on the frame. Then I turned back. I came here to give you what you gave me. She looked confused. Closure? Forgiveness? No. I slammed the door hard and walked away. This time, she was the one left in silence. It didn't take long. 3 days after I left, her voice surfaced again, this time through a local journalist who reached out to get my side of the story. Apparently, my mother had contacted a community paper, painting herself as the poor, abandoned woman whose genius son had forgotten where he came from. She claimed I'd cut ties with my loving family the moment I got rich. I read the article with quiet disbelief. Words like tragic rift and fame changed him floated between dramatized quotes and a photo of her standing on that crooked porch, arms folded like she was the victim. Julian texted me. Want us to handle it? I told him no. I didn't need to fight lies with more noise. Let them talk. People who knew me, who watched me sleep in my car, who saw me work through the nights, who lent me couches and kindness, they knew the truth. Besides, there's something poetic about silence. It leaves them guessing. And it lets the ones who betrayed you stew in the truth they can't outrun. The knock came just after midnight. I was in the workshop, running my fingers over the new chassis prototype, polished, streamlined, mine, when the doorbell echoed through the space. I almost ignored it. Only a handful of people even knew where I lived. When I opened the door, I froze. It was Derek, my childhood best friend. We hadn't spoken since I left home. Hey, he said, awkward smile on his face. Didn't think you'd remember me. He looked older, tired around the eyes. But familiar. Like a ghost I hadn't realized I missed. I remember, I said. He stepped in, glancing around the studio like it was another planet. Man, you did it. All those times you said you designed something that changed everything, I didn't believe it. But here you are. I waited. People didn't show up after 10 years just to say congrats. And then he said it. She's sick, Matt. Real sick. Liver failure. They don't think she has long. I looked at him. You want me to visit her? He didn't answer right away. Then he just said, I think you should know. Then he left. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark, the prototype behind me glowing under soft lights, Derek's words looping in my head. She doesn't have long. I hated how it stirred something in me. Not guilt exactly, just noise. The kind of emotional static that makes it hard to breathe. I thought I'd buried that part of me years ago. But the idea of her alone, weak, possibly dying, it made the silence too loud. By morning, I still hadn't made a decision. So I drove. Not to her. To him, Hank. He was in his usual spot at the shop, sipping burnt coffee from a cracked mug. She's dying, I told him, without preamble. He just nodded. You going? I shrugged. What would you do? He didn't answer right away. Just stared out the garage door, watching dust settle on the morning air. I'd go, he said finally. Not for her. For you. So you don't carry it later. Doesn't mean you forgive. Just means you're not afraid to look her in the eye one last time. I sat with that. And later that afternoon, I got in my car and drove toward the town I swore I'd never see again. Not for her. For me. The town hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks. Same blinking streetlights that never quite worked. As I turned onto my old block, I noticed the trees had grown taller. But the house looked smaller than I remembered. I parked across the street. Just sat there for a minute, engine humming, hands still on the wheel. Part of me wanted to turn around, drive straight back into the life I'd built, and never look back. But Hank was right. This wasn't about her. It was about making sure I never looked in the mirror years from now and wondered, what if? So I got out. The door was already open when I knocked. Derek was sitting just inside, like he'd been waiting. She's in the back room, he said quietly. She's been asking for you. He didn't follow. Just nodded once and let me pass. The hallway felt longer than it used to. Each step echoing memories I didn't ask for. The nights I'd been yelled at here, the afternoons I'd stood outside that locked bedroom door with trembling sketches in hand, hoping maybe this time she'd say I'm proud of you. I stepped into the room. She was propped up on pillows, frail and sunken into the mattress. An oxygen tube ran beneath her nose. Her eyes, once sharp and cold, looked distant. Softer now. But not unfamiliar. When she saw me, she blinked twice. Matthew. It barely came out. I didn't speak. Just stood there. She studied me, eyes tracing the tailored coat, the watch on my wrist, the calm in my face. For a long moment, it was like she couldn't reconcile the man in front of her with the boy she chased out of this house. You came, she said, voice brittle. I nodded. Slowly. Tears filled her eyes. I was so wrong, she whispered. About everything. I didn't know how to love you right. I was scared you'd become something I couldn't control, and when you left, I thought I'd forget you. I finally sat down. Quiet. Still. Listening. I watched you on TV, she said, her hands trembling in her lap. Saw your car. Your name on those magazines. I tell people you're my son. The bitterness hit me in the chest like ice. Now she says it. You spent years telling me I'd be nothing, I said softly. You mocked every idea I had. Every dream. You told me to stop pretending. That I was a burden. Worthless. I know, she choked out. I know, and I live with it every day. She reached out, her fingers thin and shaking, trying to find mine. I let her. For a moment, just a moment, I let her feel like a mother again. And then I gently pulled my hand back. I didn't come here to make peace, I said. I came because I needed to see it with my own eyes. That you remember. That it wasn't just in my head. That it did happen. She nodded, eyes closing as tears rolled down her cheeks. I do. Every word. Every time I slammed your door. I stood. Her eyes opened again, panicked now. Please don't go. Stay even just for... I leaned in, just enough for her to hear me. You were right, I said. I was nothing. A pause. But I became something, without you. Her lips parted, but I was already turning. And this time, I didn't just walk out. I closed her door slowly. Then slammed it. The same way she had, all those years ago. The sound echoed through the hallway as I walked away, steady, unshaken, whole. I never saw her again. She passed 3 weeks later. Derek texted me, said she asked about me near the end. I thanked him, but I didn't reply again. There was no funeral. At least, not one I attended. Back in the city, life moved on, faster, bigger, louder. The Orion hit production. Interviews, conferences, magazine covers. I smiled when I had to, spoke when I needed to. But at night, when everything was quiet, I'd sit by the window and remember the boy in that bedroom, holding torn sketches and hope like it was armor. And I'd think, she tried to bury me. But I wasn't a seed. I was a flame. And she was the first to feel the heat.